Welcome back. This is Larry Morris, and today we'll cover part two of session one, the basics of building your book for Amazon. And let's first talk about the basic formatting of a manuscript, and we'll cover some things that will apply to any manuscript, no matter the kind. First of all, as I've mentioned before, when you're putting the manuscript together, if it's possible, and if you can do this, format it as you write. And this will become clearer when we get to the detail and show you how to set up Word to handle a manuscript. And use Microsoft Word. There are a lot of alternatives out there, and some of them are even free, but most of them don't have half of Word's capabilities. And I'm talking about the desktop version of Word, not the online version. With the advent of everything in the cloud, quote unquote, there are actually two versions of Word now that only run online, and neither one of them have all the capabilities of the desktop version. And this is especially important if you have photographs or diagrams in the book. You can use Word's default settings for almost all the manuscript formatting, and you'll see this when we get to the detail. Things to avoid are odd or unusual fonts, because they usually are not portable to Kindle, and also lots of tabs and spaces for alignment for the same reason. You can set up paragraph formatting to handle indentation, line spacing, font, and use Word styles capability to set templates for headings, quotes, and special sections. Insert a single page break at a minimum at the end of every chapter. You can sprinkle more throughout the book, and we'll talk about that when we get to the detail. Use section breaks sparingly and usually only to control the capability of having different headers and footers in different places in the book. This is a list of what typically can be included as front matter and what typically can be included as back matter. Specific formatting guidelines for paperback and hardcover. Manuscript formatting for paperback and hardcover is usually described with an acronym that's pronounced WYSIWYG. It stands for what you see is what you get. And essentially what it means is when you're in Word looking at a page of your book with headers and footers, perhaps headings and margin and gutter definitions, exactly the way you see it on your screen is the way the book page is going to be printed. Amazon has a lot of articles that go through formatting guidelines, and I would start with this one. And when you get to this particular web page, look to the left and you'll see a directory of sorts with every topic that Amazon provides help on. Templates for Word are also available for download from Amazon. I would, however, use them with caution, because if you are not that adept at Word or relatively new at using it, this might even complicate the process, because a lot of these templates have a lot of different control characters that are invisible, and they have so many styles defined that it just might make things worse for somebody who's new at it. The most widely supported formats, or trim sizes as they are called, right now are 5 by 8, 5.5 by 8.5, and 6 by 9. This is by no means the complete list. Amazon supports dozens of trim sizes, even a custom one where within boundaries you can set your own trim size. And please note that every trim size is specified as width versus height. So if you're talking about a 6 by 9 trim size, that's 6 inches wide by 9 inches tall. 12-point type is now considered normal. Thank goodness it's not 10 anymore. 14 point is usually considered the lower edge of the large print fonts. I've settled for most of my books on 14 point because a little bit larger type helps. 1.15 line spacing, which is a little bit more than single spacing, which helps also. And Bookman Old Style is usually what I use, although from time to time I do waffle between that and something called Georgia. I encourage you to check both of those out. But remember, print cost is based on page count, line spacing, font size, and a few other things, and the author always pays the print cost. Amazon also has very specific guidelines for gutter, margin, and bleed requirements that are all at that link above. Now let's look at some samples of basic formatting, and this is what we'll cover in detail in the following session and exactly how to do it. The first thing we'll talk about is how to set up chapter or section headings, and I recommend that anybody doing this use word styles to create and define the headings. And this is something we'll spend a lot of time on talking about in detail. Not only does it make it easier to establish headings and keep track of the fact that all your primary headings should be the same and all your secondary headings should be the same, and you can have as many different levels of headings as you need. If you use the styles formatting technique in Word, Word will automatically build a table of contents for you. And what that means also is that later, before you publish, if you change anything in the book that changes the page orientation, moves data around, Word will automatically update that table of contents so you don't have to keep track of it. The second thing and the third thing we'll cover are headers and footers. These are very straightforward. Footers usually contain the page number, any kind of format you want, any position. And the headers, typically nowadays, you will see the name of the book on the left side of an even page and the name of the author on the right side of an odd page. And by the way, in this country, left-facing pages in the book are always even and right-facing pages in the book are always odd. And obviously that makes sense because when you open the front cover of the book and the only thing you see there is one page, and that is page 1, and it's a right-facing page. So that carries through the rest of the book. We'll also talk, when we get to this in detail, about how to define the length of the header and the length of the footer and what that actually means in Word and how that's calculated. Next thing we would discuss is the paragraph formatting, how to do that automatically. That will cover indentation, the concept of orphans and stragglers. That's bits of a paragraph at the bottom and the top of a page. You can control whether or not you want a paragraph split across pages or not, all kinds of things like that, and Word will handle all of that automatically. And then the last thing we'll handle is the gutter, which, again, if you look at the page numbers, the gutter represents the area between a left-facing page and a right-facing page when you have the book open. And notice the size of that margin area is different than it is in any other case in the book. The reason for that is you don't want to put the reader in a situation where when they open the book, they have to break the spine to actually be able to read what's on the fringes of the paragraphs. And naturally, as the page count increases, the size of the spine increases, and therefore the gutter should also increase. So we'll talk about that and how it's calculated and how you can set it up. Now, basic formatting for Kindle is very different than for paperback. It has changed over the years. Originally, you had to pay particular attention to how you set this up versus a paperback, meaning you couldn't have page numbers and headers and footers and things like that. Now we're to the point where most of that stuff is ignored by Amazon because they know it's irrelevant for Kindle. I would start by looking at this document, but again, I would take what's in this document, in some cases with a grain of salt. This is an old document. It is an ebook, and it's free. You can download it to your Kindle. If you don't have a Kindle, you can download a Kindle app for your phone or your PC and read it there. But a lot of the stuff that's in this book or article, particularly when they talk about saving the document as an HTML file and handling photos in a zip file, that's all relatively old. And some of the things that it tells you to do really aren't even supported anymore. So, but I would take a look at it anyway. The best advice I can give you right now for creating a Kindle is that depending on how complicated your paperback is, meaning how complicated the headings are, whether you have any diagrams in the book, what the font and the type size is, all of that, you may be able to get away with using the paperback manuscript as is. The first recommendation I can give to you for a Kindle is try to upload the paperback manuscript as a Kindle, and when you go through the review process, if it looks fine to you, then you're home free. You may have to make some adjustments, and in order to do that, to keep the two straight, you will more than likely wind up having to copy the paperback manuscript file, get into it in Word and do a save as to create a Kindle manuscript. And then you can make any changes you need to in the Kindle manuscript without affecting the paperback. The good news is you can do what you need to in both of those to make them look good. The bad news is that if you have to do this, you now have two copies of the manuscript, and if you update it, you have to update it in two places. Or you can use something called Kindle Create. That's a new piece of software, relatively new, from Amazon, and it lets you input your paperback manuscript and it produces a Kindle file, and you can use that also to make changes to the Kindle file. But I have no direct experience here. I've never worked with that process. And we'll talk a little bit about kids' books, which in Kindle are a little different to work with. They even have another separate function of the Kindle Create software to handle kids' books, and it's very straightforward. Photo handling, generally in either a Kindle manuscript or a paperback, use insert picture function of Word. Don't use copy and paste. Copy and paste will work, and you'll get the photograph in, but you may lose some quality. Make sure that the image size and quality option is set to not compress. We'll talk about that in detail in the next session. Word is not too smart at this. If you have a JPEG in your Word document, which is a compressed file by its very nature, if you don't have this option set, when you save that document, Word will actually try to compress that file again, even though it's been compressed once. So this is the way to make sure none of your files are affected by compress in terms of quality. It will make the Word document larger, but it's worth it to have better quality photos. When you select the photo, right after you insert it or when you select it later, a small box will appear outside the photograph's right upper corner. If you need to adjust the size of the photo, click on it, hold down the Shift key, and grab a corner and drag it in or out. Don't grab the side of the photo. And the hold down your Shift key recommendation really only applies to older versions of Windows. If you have or Microsoft Word, if you have the latest version, you don't need to do that. That's been changed. paperback or hardcover, photos can pretty much be where you want them. Again, because of the fact that these are WYSIWYG, and they can be left justified, right justified, centered. You can have, using that technique that I mentioned above with that small box that appears on the photo's upper right corner, you can even set it up so that, like in a newspaper column, the text will flow around a photograph. And placing the photos becomes critical, especially if you have more than one or two photos on a page. This allows you to put them anywhere you want to and group them. In a Kindle, normally, anything you have in a Kindle that's not text, that's a table or a chart or a diagram, because keep in mind you're using Word and you can draw boxes and shapes and things like that. Anything that you have that's not text, the best approach in Kindle is to turn it into a photograph, either a JPEG or a PNG, drag it into a photo processing piece of software, and save it as a JPEG or a PNG. Kindle doesn't work well with anything that's not a photo. And then insert either a carriage return, which is the enter key, or a page break before and after the photo to make sure it gets isolated correctly from the text. The only time you'll really have an issue with photos in a Kindle, and we'll cover this in detail when we talk about the details of photo handling. If you have captions with photos, those can be an issue. In a paperback, you can add a caption to a photograph and move the photograph and the caption independently to position them any way you want to. And there's even a way, a couple different ways in Word that you can, in a paperback, that you can group a photograph and its caption together as a unit and then move them together. None of those processes will survive the transition to Kindle. And the problem with photos and captions in Kindle is, more often than not, the photograph will appear on one screen with the caption appearing on the following screen. So the reader has to go back and forth to look at the photograph and the caption together. The only solution to this that anybody's been able to come up with is to take the photograph and pull it into a photo processing software, whatever your favorite is, add the caption to it, and then export the photograph and the caption together as a single unit. That way they are literally the same and they can move together no matter where they are. That's the only way to make it work effectively in a Kindle. Cover design basics. First, the thing to consider is the art, whatever kind of art you're using on your cover, whether it's an artistic drawing or whether it's a photograph. That's the first thing somebody sees when they pick up your photo, or excuse me, when they pick up your book. And I've heard several people say this, including me from time to time, that front covers bring people to the books because that's the first thing they see. And the back cover, when they pick it up and look at the book and flip it over and look at the back cover, that usually closes the sale. So you have to pay attention to both sides, but the front cover is the very first thing they see. So take advantage of stark black and white contrasts or bright colors or both. Custom cover art, while it is impressive, it can be very expensive. So I would consider looking at any of these 4 websites. Each one of them contains millions of pieces of art and photography that artists are trying to sell. And on any of them, you can typically find something that works well for your cover, that reflects the content of the book and the way you want it to look, for a minimal, in most cases, $12 to $15 to $50 range. And the license will let you use that art as often as you want to, for as many books as you want to, and it even gives you the ability to make changes to the art if it's not quite the way you want it. I use the first one on the list exclusively now. I've used them all from time to time, but I use Dreams Time now exclusively. And just like formatting, covers are different for Kindle, paperback, and hardcover. Now, actually creating the cover for paperback and hardcover, and both paperback and hardcover can share the same manuscript, by the way, and we mentioned that before, but you have to have separate covers for them. Amazon has a piece of software called a cover creator online that allows you to build a cover for a paperback or a hardcover. It's not very old, not very full featured. We'll talk about some things in a few slides here that will show you what you can and can't do with it. And it was modeled after software on the original CreateSpace website, which we all used to publish books years ago before really Amazon got that involved in it. You can use any of these software products from Adobe or other software creators to build your own cover. I've used several of them, and I rely exclusively now on Inkscape to do covers because it not only supports everything you need to do a cover, it's a very excellent vector graphics tool to build things from scratch if you want to. The only real requirement is whatever you decide to use for covering or for a cover needs to allow you to do layering, and it has to be saved as a PDF, or you have to work natively in the PDF template to build a cover, one way or the other. Now, the alternative to Cover Creator exclusively or doing custom covers is to start with Amazon's Cover Creator and see if that meets your needs. And then eventually, if it doesn't, you can move to building your own cover or paying for a custom cover to get what you want. Paperback and hardcovers must be laid out on different templates. You can use the same cover elements, but they have to be done on different templates. And the templates look like this. These are the ones you download from Amazon. You specify the trim size, the number of pages, and what kind of paper you want, white or cream, and a couple of other odds and ends. And then you can download this template and actually build the cover yourself. The only thing you have to avoid on Amazon is this area on the back of the cover, because that's where they're going to put the ISBN barcode. And this is what a final cover might look like. A couple things to point out that you can't do with Cover Creator at all is, see this little clip art here, it's a Roadrunner, and it's in 3 different places. It's difficult to do this with Cover Creator because in most cases in Cover Creator you're given a template that says you can put text here and you can put text here and you can put a photograph or artwork here, and that's it. They don't give you very much flexibility in terms of layering things. For example, this front cover is actually 3 pieces of art. The entire background is 1 piece of art that came off of Dreams Time, and this is a second piece of art that came off of the same software platform. And this piece of clip art is one of my photographs that I turned into clip art. So you can layer things like this together if you design and build your own covers, but it's next to impossible to do it with Amazon's Cover Creator. And then the last thing we'll mention quickly on this session is cover art for Kindle. Is quite simple. If you want to do it separately, if you already have a photograph that you have used for your paperback, you can bring that photograph into photo software and add the title and the author name, and then you're done. What a lot of people do is take the paperback cover and drag it into the photo processing software and crop out everything except the front cover and then save that as a JPEG. The Kindle cover doesn't have to be the same as a paperback, but generally it is the same as the front cover. So thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you all in the next session. And don't forget to support all of your local authors.